Hello, thank you so much for clicking this video today. I really appreciate it. It's going to be an exciting one. I've got Frederick Regard here on for another podcast, and we're going to be learning the latest with the Cardano Foundation. I think it's been almost a year since our last recording in Dubai. How have you been doing since then, Frederick?
I've been doing really well. It's been super exciting, but also extremely busy. And I really can feel that the Cardano Foundation is doing so many things. I think it's been really busy and really cool. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, it's always a pleasure getting to speak with you. I recently saw that you did some recording for Binance for their Binance Academy. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So I mean these large centralized exchanges is something I love with one part of my heart. And on the other part of my heart, I'm sort of thinking, wouldn't it be, cool if we can actually take complete control of our own keys and work in a completely decentralized fashion? But we still need this fiat, to crypto rails. And specifically, Binance has been doing extremely well in onboarding. And since the new CEO took over, we've seen sort of an interest in terms of also engaging more with Cardano. And there's different ways of doing that. And one of the ways we're exploring right now, which I'm not really sure how much I'm actually allowed to talk about it, right? But I gave a hint on it, right? Is we are putting the Cardano Academy into the Binance Academy. So we're doing a specific like 2 hour education on Cardano and on blockchain, our version of blockchain, right? UTXO based, Hydra, the smart contracting system we have to give all the people on Binance and everybody who's not just have an account, but also get the education through Binance, give them an anchor on how they can get further into the Cardano ecosystem, A, as builders, B, as interest stakeholders, call it whatever you want, and C, as also potentially taking part in some of the governance and the decentralization we are seeing specifically on Cardano. We've seen a couple of other ecosystems who sort of got stuck in governance, right? And are fighting their way out. And I think there's a real chance that we might also get stuck somewhere along the way. So one of the things which I find is really important is that we find ways to have people who really is really passionate about blockchain, but also has experience from some of those other ecosystems, kind of get them interested in Cardano and start getting them ported into Cardano and use some of their experience they've had from other ecosystems, and also how we express governance on Cardano. So it's to start with, is a 2 hour session coming from the Cardano Academy with a big cry out to do more. And I don't know if you just saw, we also just launched the Cardano Academy in Portuguese, and it's been a massive uptake in terms of certifications and interest. And it also truly, you can really feel that English is just not enough. If you really want to reach the world, English only is just not sufficient, huh? So I think
Yeah.
there's some good approaches there happening.
Yeah, I hope to see in the future, education portals that are expanded into multiple languages, Spanish, English, Mandarin or Portuguese, as you said. I think that would be very helpful for a lot of people. You mentioned this idea of seeing other, blockchain communities, get stuck in governance. Could you expand upon that a little bit? Kind of how have you seen these other communities get stuck before? And what do you think that we can do as, the Cardano community to kind of, learn from these past experiences with other blockchains?
Yeah, so first and foremost, maybe a big cry out to the Cardano ambassadors, right? So through the Cardano ambassadors, we got a hold on the Web3, so the Polkadot ecosystem, right? And
Hmm.
we started collaborating. So our ambassadors collaborate with their ambassadors and sharing experiences in terms of improvement proposals, governance, voting, those kind of things. But it also meant that some of the people from Cardano suddenly got very interested in the tech stack, but also in how you run on Polkadot and became dual ambassadors. And on the other way, some of the ambassadors from Polkadot then entered into the Cardano ecosystem. And I think we've seen some very fruitful discussions there. I've been for a long time, keeping tabs and having a close contact to the Web3 Foundation. We sort of it's a foundation, right? It has a different mandate than the Cardano Foundation, right? But it shares a lot of the battles and a lot of the history. And I think one thing we have to constantly be doing, and the same also goes with MakerDAO and others, right? We need to look beyond, because interoperability is a key to adoption. And when you look at these sort of public digital infrastructures such as Cardano, I think we have a lot of very positive things going on for us. But one of the things we have to be very native about is that every time something goes or everything. When something is hard, first we argue, then we use Twitter to get, our anger out there, and then we
Hmm.
centralize. And when you look other places, what we see is that it's a little bit the same was happening. It's just less anger. So they come to a situation where they realize that centralization might be the fastest way to get out of it. And I would love that the Cardano ecosystem, with all the experience and all the people we have who's engaged, that we don't pick the centralization road. Let's try and actually pick a road where we can be, reasonable, or actually as decentralized as possible, or what makes sense, and still move forward. So we're not suddenly stuck in a situation where we have to, cry out and ask the D-reps to vote for the new constitutional committee, right? So we don't go into a situation where we have a network in no trust state, right? And I think what has been decided or designed right now, we need to move that forward. It's really,
Yeah.
really good. But as we start playing the rules of the game after Voltaire, we see certain things are a bit too complicated, or it turns out that we were not specific enough in the documentation, or the code base didn't reflect the implementation, or there's certain things. I think what Cardano has always been very good at is testing it, verifying it, and moving it forward. It might not be the fastest, but we keep moving forward. This steady state of moving forward is something we really have to focus on, and not do something dramatically as, oh, it didn't work, let's centralize it for 1 year. We've seen some other ecosystems where suddenly the founder or one of the co-founders has to go in basically and rip the carpet away and say, this is how we do it, otherwise we will not survive, right? And I think this is one of the places I really truly hope that, with all the smart people who is around Cardano, that we get to a situation that through collaboration, through experience in the code base, and through experience in the real world, we'll be able to move forward without centralizing.
Yeah, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I've honestly heard a lot of talks about kind of introducing an executive function to Cardano's governance. So you're against that, you think?
Well, there's this old saying, right? If you want to go fast, you go alone. If you want to go far,
Yeah.
you go as a team, right?
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot to talk about it, right? You've seen, if you look at the market cap of blockchains today, right? You've seen this sort of effect that very centralized teams with an executive function can create a huge market cap over,
Hmm.
a year or 2 years, right? But I think what's so unique about Cardano is that we came so far, we overcome so many hurdles, and we did that as a giant team who keeps evolving. But now we stand and we look at other people moving extremely fast, and we keep asking ourselves, are we somehow doomed? Are we, because we are not moving fast enough, right?
Yeah.
And I think where, another example maybe on this is just from today, right? So maybe this is timely. I don't know if you picked up on this, right? But MakerDAO, right? They have a new name, right? They actually just got an S&P rating. It's a B rating, right? But what's really interesting is when you, first and foremost, we have a global stable coin, which is not one of the big two ones, right?
Hmm.
Who got a rating from an agency. What that basically means is that the traditional world of finance suddenly went in and did a full risk analysis on that, and were able to put their blue stamp and say, this is it, huh? And we actually, I think this is a very, very interesting part, because this basically opens up the door to be a precedent for other stable coins, right? Imagine USDA or USDM or DJET coming. And if you look under the hood, what's really interesting, I know we're probably not supposed to talk about this, but it's really interesting, right? The 3-4 points they're mentioning why they got a B rating is governance centralization. So the founder controls 9% of the tokens, but effectively dominates due to low voter turnout. This is very interesting when you kind of look at the first couple of votes on Cardano, right? We don't have the voter turnout which we were hoping on, and it's also quite advanced to actually vote. You know that as a D-rep and so on, right? But it's not easy, right? And that's also one of the reasons why the Cardano Foundation has done this voting portal, right? Because we saw there were so many mistakes in voting or doing suggestions. So I don't know if you've been in on voting.cardanofoundation.org. It basically is a super nice UX who basically leads you through everything, so you don't have any administrative mistakes happening when you are casting your vote as a D-rep or as an SPO, or if you're doing a governance proposal, right? So it basically cuts away, and it's just focused on doing the correct voting, right? The other part is regulatory uncertainty. So no established framework for decentralized stablecoin issuers. again, this is really interesting, right? Because I mean, we saw the issuance of the Wyoming stablecoin also today, right? But we also saw some of the work we've been doing with other blockchains, but also with JP Morgan and Everlabs and Accenture and so on, around trying to get a risk mitigation, a global risk mitigation framework for digital infrastructure. We truly need that if we really want to, not just double our size or triple our size, but if we want to get to 2-3 billion people in the current world, the world is not changing fast enough from a policy landscape, so we need these standards out there. Then it speaks about weak capitalization. We can always discuss if that's weak or not, right? It's a 0.4% risk-adjusted capital ratio versus traditional bank standards. And then it talks about depositor concentration. And here, this is really, really interesting, right? Because depositor concentration is really this idea about risk of liquidation from large withdrawals. And we saw a little bit of that actually on Cardano, right? Because I don't know if you noticed that USDM went quite, had a spike downward, right? A month or something ago. And when you kind of look at that, this is actually, this is something we have to be quite aware of, right? And when you kind of take that into a larger picture, what we certainly need is we need stable coins, right? I would ideally say not only do we need stable coins, but we need Cardano native stable coins, right? Now, them being interoperable with something else is also great, but we need depth of liquidity. So we saw with the first treasury withdrawals, some people already starting to have issues with actually converting the treasury withdrawal into USDM because there's not enough depth of liquidity to do that to USDA or USDM. But MakerDAO has been around for a long time, have much deeper liquidity, right, than what we're actually seeing on Cardano. So the fact that they are really talking about deposit concentration / the depth, right, it basically means that they are also seeing some concentration where a few people sits with very large positions, right?
Yeah.
And I think that might actually not be unusual. We see that across TradFi as well. But to anchor or to go against or risk mitigate against that, you need bigger size, right? And that basically means that some of us, you and me, we sometimes have to hurt a bit because we know we're going to do some USDA and some USDM transactions, which we wouldn't necessarily do because there's just too much of a slippage or something like that. But this is the way it's one of the ways we can get there as private individuals. And then as institutions, as the Cardano Foundation, we're very much looking into the Elder proposal, so the DeFi proposal out there, which is sort of a co-op, where we have some suggestions around how to push the native stablecoins on Cardano, right, by more DeFi activity, but also order book. Plus, we had some really good talks with some very large market makers about, is there a way we can, basically hire somebody to do some of that work, and if we would do that, could we use oracles on Cardano, right, to basically anchor the KPIs? Because what would be really, really sweet is that, somebody, Cardano Foundation, Treasury, doesn't really matter, but somebody pays and it's the contracting party, defines the KPIs. What could be really nice is that we can get into a situation that the community can follow if the vendor actually lives up to those KPIs on the blockchain using either Charlie 3, Orcax, or any other Oracle provider out there. Because then we suddenly start seeing with this circle of truth happening, right? It's not about what I say I do. It's not about what you think I do. It's about what we can verify what is happening. And that opens up a whole set of other use cases. And that's also why we sort of, not just because of this specific point, but this is one of the reasons we are so interested in figuring out, is there a way we can get these Oracle providers to be more than just algorithmic oracles on chain. We need them to have a very strong digital identity. So they basically, that it would be very expensive to have a man in the middle, and they can start actually anchoring third-party data into the blockchain, even though it has a huge value, right? So you can write options on it, or you can do reinsurance and all those kind of things. So I think there is something about this S&P rating which really sort of verifies how we think about things. But when you kind of look at least on the first couple of points, we are actually doing pretty well, right? As Cardano, and I think we can be quite proud about that.
Yeah, I is looking at the the way regulation's going, and I think that, while it does take time, governments are kind of starting to open their eyes to decentralization, which I think is kind of the core value that, blockchain brings to the forefront of society. So we have kind of been slow in some regards on Cardano with stablecoin liquidity, but the decentralization's there. And if you look at, Bitcoin, for example, it took it a while to really, come to the forefront of society, but that decentralization is kind of what brought it there ultimately. And I think that, as governments kind of look at this technology, they're going to be looking, as you said, at the number of voters, the decentralization of power, and it really is going to kind of put Cardano at the top, in my opinion.
Yeah, but we also have to be careful, right? And this is probably one of my weaknesses as well, right? Because I don't engage a lot in back and forth on Twitter, right?
Yeah.
But what we are seeing is happening right now in these institutional due diligence processes is
Hmm.
they don't have time to like do a thorough investigation of the
Yeah.
complete ecosystem, right? So they're looking for data sources. And as Grok and Gemini and ChatGPT and so on get stronger and stronger, it becomes an average. It's plain vanilla basically. There
Yeah.
is a set of prompts which is being entered, and a part of that data it pulls out is the tone of voice and the positive/negative comments, which is happening in these public spaces, right?
Yeah.
So where we are winning right now is on the technology stack, as you rightfully are saying. So what basically Charles and IOG has basically gone forward with is,
Hmm.
is is winning. But if we don't win on the adoption front, we will have the best technology but no usage. And what we have to be really careful here is that there's this trade-off between we want to have an open and honest collaborative talk where some people want to be anonymous, some people are not, like me, right?
Hmm.
Um, but we also need to be aware that the opportunities in front of us are just getting bigger, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we are negotiating right now with the state in the U.S. about an identity solution, right? And
Awesome.
yeah, that's amazing, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we said no last year. We spoke, and you said, why did you say no to the voting solution? I was like, yeah, because we're not quite there with identity, right?
Yeah.
Now we're there with identity. We actually got, I don't know if you saw, we got a VLEI. So we're the only foundation out there right now who has a virtual legal entity identifier. And the LEI, which is sort of this framework for identity, which moves 80% of world goods, like think containers and fish and chips for Nvidia, all paper trading, etc. Right, is moving to the virtual legal entity identifier. And Cardano is the only one who has a wallet who can do that across all infrastructures. So it's not about Cardano as a blockchain. It's not about other blockchains. It's not about centralized. This works across all of it, right? And we're now at a stage where some of these things are coming together, and these due diligence processes become tougher, right? The stakes are going up, right? And I think this is so exciting that we can play it as a part of that. And we also see now, public consultations, and we see, people who's asking in an RFP, and we see that Cardano goes through where some of the really big blockchains are not coming through due to something, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so it's really interesting, and I think what we have to really, as a community, be really aware of is keeping this freedom of speech, keeping this collaborative. That if you have an issue, you can raise it, and you can take it out there, and you can use the crowd funding brain power of the crowd, right? But also at the same time know that you know um, Grok, Gemini, and all these guys are listening 24/7, and whatever we write out there becomes a part of our narrative and a part of our story. And yeah, I don't know how we're going to deal with that, but I think this is one of the things we have to be aware of if we want Cardano to truly be living up to its potential. And at the same time, as I'm saying, let's not do any shortcuts, right? Let's
Yeah.
not centralize just to get ahead of the game, right? Let's keep the architecture, let's keep the ethos, let's keep what we've been building, and move that forward. And that's difficult.
Yeah, it's interesting to think that the AI is kind of listening now and kind of, building a narrative about Cardano based on what people are posting on X. I feel like, even 4 years ago, you'd say something, you'd have some back and forth about it, and that was it. It may get brought up a year or two later, but that's it. Whereas, AI is kind of using this, global kind of engagement and then kind of merging that into a narrative. And I like that you brought up KPIs earlier, right? As we head into this, decentralized governance, era for Cardano, we do need solid KPIs to see if, people are delivering. And there really is no kind of standard. But getting into decentralized identity a little bit, over the past couple of months, you guys launched the Viridian wallet and then also open sourced it. And I was kind of playing around with it on my phone a little bit, but I imagine, a lot of my audience hasn't really heard of the wallet yet. So can you kind of tell us more about that? How does it set itself apart from other wallets on Cardano, and how does it tie into, decentralized identity?
Yeah, I mean, I think the right way of thinking about it is that I am Frederick Rieger, the CEO of the Cardano Foundation. I'm also the father of two kids. I also engage in my local community. I also do hold power of attorney and some board positions, right? And all of those things are different identities. Now, they might all anchor up to who I am, but I
Yeah.
certainly don't want all information from my Cardano place to go somewhere else, right?
Hmm.
So what we truly need is not everybody thinks about there's one identity, there's one person who's me or one company who's me or whatever. But that's actually not how we interact with identity. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to build a reference implementation of a wallet who could handle everything from DITs to verified credentials. So what we do with Masumi and so on, all the way up to the highest scrutiny, so quantum secure, TradFi kind of this the LEI we spoke about, right? And what we also wanted to do was we did not want to do it on Cardano, because if you do it on Cardano, you have to say then Cardano has to win, right? And there cannot be any other reality than Cardano wins above anything else. And I thought that was a bit too arrogant. But if you build it outside Cardano and give it away for free, you don't know exactly what ecosystem is going to pick up on that. But what you do know, it will be interoperable with Cardano.
Yeah.
And that's beautiful, right? So what we see right now is we see some centralized, very large players in the identity space suddenly are implementing this wallet in their backend to manage their identities, right? And they're not using the blockchain. But because they're using this, they're starting to also add to the repos and so on. And we can then engage with them and say, you know what, there's actually an added value in anchoring some of that security in the blockchain. And they're like, oh, I never thought about the blockchain as that. I thought about the blockchain as a cryptocurrency. I thought about it as, tracking certain metadata points, right? But
Yeah.
anchoring that as a part of your security against brute force attacks or against, takeovers or against some types of cybersecurity suddenly makes a lot of sense, right? And having a community like Cardano, where you have thousands of stakepool operators who's individually set up and has very high security, who basically then protect your hashes or protect these security anchors of that, suddenly enables you to at least have a first level of defense about some of the emergent technology who comes. And that puts us in a completely different basket, right? It puts us suddenly straight into telco, straight into critical country infrastructure, straight into some of those businesses we've been dreaming about for a long time, right? And whether they then take, identity standard A, B, or C, we kind of are leaning towards, we kind of starting to understand what they're doing, depending on a cost benefit analysis, right? But the fact that they can always become backwards interoperable with Cardano becomes a Trojan horse strategy. And the other part is we did not want to, there's a lot of really good identity projects in the Cardano ecosystem, but people were thinking about a bespoke wallet and a bespoke identity standard. They were not thinking about an open source wallet who can basically host all identity standards. So my hope was actually that Uroi and Lace and Eternal and others would basically take this Viridian, right, and basically over time maybe put it into the crypto wallets, right, as you can manage, your Cardano native assets or Cardano native tokens, and you can, now also you can manage other blockchains in some of these wallets, right? That you can also start managing your identities in plural in there. I think that's just truly unique, and I think that's amazing. And I'm kind of hoping that, we started this story, but we're not going to be there to finish it. That's sort of my hope, right? My hope is that somebody's going to pick this up and make a huge business out of it, and then run as flames and show how great Cardano is and show how great blockchain is out there with this kind of offering.
Yeah, I mean, this might be a bit of a technical question, but how does this, kind of live outside the blockchain? Using the code that you guys open source, how can a business kind of use this code, use this identity system and wallet, in their existing business without the blockchain?
Yeah, so there's a foundation who's doing that already right now. So what they're basically struggling with is to have a standardized, centralized authorization system.
Yeah.
If you sign a contract, it has to be signed by the CFO and the CEO. But if it's a vendor contract, the head of IT, or if it's the landlord, those kind of things.
Yeah.
They're basically introducing that as a digital signature, where you basically you have your wallet, and this is what you sign with, a little bit like DocuSign and those kind of things. But in DocuSign, basically it's not a very strong identity, right? It's very easy to break in through the DocuSign, right? And you sign it with your finger and all of those, right? It's not a hard identity as such. So this opens up this idea that you can basically use this for companies on how you manage the signatory rights across the company, or how you do that for trustee companies, or how you do that for complex organizations with daughter companies. And you can then assign different authentication and different premises to these people. And that's all a part of the repos today. And so, yeah, one foundation is already is putting that under the hood, implementing that. And they said, we would like to start without blockchain, and then we will put it on the blockchain later. We just want to see that it kind of, that it works, right? And that's the beauty of it here. You can take a lot of identity standards. You can implement this and manage that through this wallet solution, right? Either on your phone or on your desktop, or a combination, right? And then you can basically upgrade that with the power of our community and our blockchain.
Awesome. Yeah, I saw recently you're in Washington D.C. for the GBBC event.
Yeah.
What came out of that event? What was it like kind of being in Washington, especially in the time where crypto is really at the forefront of Washington D.C.
So I think multiple things came out of it, right? So we've been working with the Global Business Blockchain Council, right? Which is getting really, really big, specifically in the US around this new global risk mitigation standard. And we actually ended up writing quite a big part of this because we've been so active in some of these public consultations, and we have the technical knowledge. So I don't know if you read the report already, but the report is now launched in the first iteration, and it's actually open for other, so for public view and remarks and comments. So obviously I was kind of hoping that maybe somebody who loves Cardano, who sits in a function, it's a quite nerdy stuff, right? But this is what you need to run a country's infrastructure, right? That somebody will go in and comment on this and take this out. The other part was I had the pleasure to being in the treasury. I haven't been there before, so that was cool to meet with the crypto committee under the treasury, and basically had a long chat with them about stable coins, T-bills, yield curves, and how these things will influence each other. And we had multiple back and forth after that. So I think that we left a good impression. I also had the possibility to go to the Hill and then meet members from the Agriculture Committee and so forth. They already had, Charles himself, as a witness there, right? So they had a good idea. But what they went really deep on, which I thought was very interesting, is as you saw, the 2 new acts has been approved, right?
Yeah.
And what they were really focused on was the non-financial part. So we really spoke about precision geo-tracking of Massey Ferguson tractors in Midwest America, and how the blockchain can actually make a difference there. So anything that falls under the commodities, is basically what they were really interested in. And what they found was very interesting was that we could bring the European nation and a view to how this is working on our side of the pond. but I could show them real use cases, right? So, you know, I had one of my hoodies with me. I had some track and trace things with them. I could show them real commodities and how that's being tracked and geo tracking, right? And they really loved that. And what sort of dawned on me is that sometimes, you know, blockchain is not as tangible as we would like it to be, right?
Yeah.
It's this like this fluffy thing who lives in the digital space, and we can't really touch it, but we interact with it, right? And I think we, as a community, we need to be much better in making it extremely tangible. Meaning, you know, yeah, whatever we do, just put it on the blockchain, right? We just had a producer of designer chairs who put like a couple of hundred chairs on the blockchain on Cardano and do track and trace and that, right? And we have to kind of collect some of these artifacts and always sort of be running around with a new cool artifact which is on the blockchain, even though it's sometimes it's a little bit silly, you know.
Yeah.
But this is what makes it real for some of these people, right?
Mm-hmm.
And making it real makes them go to the Cardano Academy, makes them go and interact with people like you and other thought leaders and make this world be interesting. The other part which shocked me to the bone a bit was Reef. So, you know, we've been last year we published you know, our earnings statement and our balance sheet on the blockchain, and now we published the repos, but now we also published all the APIs, and we actually you know, published all last year's all financial transactions from the Cardano Foundation. And they were basically, the first question was, why would you do that? That's really stupid. When we started talking about why would you do that, it became, you know, quite clear how much time they spend in defending their budgets and their spending, right? They have so many questions around that. But this is actually a self-service portal. Now, it might get really hard, you know, if you're hiding something, or if you're, you know, if you're doing something a little bit, you know, under the hood. But if you're not hiding anything and you're doing anything in the best intent, right? And then it might still be judged as wrong, right? This becomes a self-service portal where you move the cost of transparency to zero. So the fact that you can just walk in on a UX, if you're not very technical, and you can look up what the Cardano Foundation paid in rent, you know, what did they pay in salary, right? How much did they pay the vendors? You know what, you know, those kind of things is really, really scary, but it also is really opening the eyes of how you actually control spending, but also how you make all stakeholders to be auditors if they choose so, right?
Yeah.
And with use of machine learning and large language models and so on, right? What you basically do is you just hook your large language model up to the API, right? You start asking questions, right? And a lot of
Mm-hmm.
this would be, you know, non-value adding, right? Let's be honest, right? Because you maybe you don't understand how to read it, and the model doesn't do it either, because we are the first one who ever done this, right?
Yeah.
So the fact that our full accounting data is out there on the blockchain means that the large language models didn't have a lot to train on, right?
Mm-hmm.
But as we go along, right, and we see more companies doing that, and this would, of course, mainly be membership-based organizations. There will be NGOs. There will be companies who are under scrutiny, right? So if you think about, you know, companies like GameStop or companies like Credit Suisse and others who suddenly found themselves either being on the right side of the internet community and the bot community, or on the wrong side of that, you could have spent like $500 million in branding and build up the best brand in the whole world, and then you have 50,000 Russian bots against you, plus a community who thinks you're doing something wrong. You can't prove if you have done something right or wrong financially until the next audit. And then somebody says, yeah, but I don't trust Deloitte, or I don't trust EY, and how should I know this, you know? But it's already too late, right? You're already, you're gone, right? And you can start building that up again and again. And I think this is exactly what we were looking for the blockchain. But what was shocking to me was I didn't think the world was ready for this. And I still don't think the world is ready for this, right? But I think this is the journey. And the fact that in the US, so many people were interested in this type of transparency, anchored with oracles and decentralized identities, right? I thought that was really interesting, right? They're all struggling with, you know, accurate data. They're all struggling with, I get this data set, but how do I actually know it's true? How do I actually know that the data set I'm going to base my opinions on has not been manipulated, right? How do I know that this is not something who was sent to me so I can communicate something in a certain direction? And I think tools like Reef, who does this, is going to be, you know, the spearhead basically on this type of transparency.
Yeah, this seems like a great use case for DAOs as well.
Oh yeah,
You know, especially as you mentioned, if you have an LLM model kind of hooked up to this data, and you can kind of query that, because a lot of people are, members of DAOs in the blockchain industry, but they don't really have an access to all of that data. And because it's all in the blockchain, it's really hard for a regular person to kind of look into that. So I could definitely see how this, open source software you released could be a big benefit for different DAO members. And I actually even saw a tweet from Charles when you guys released this, and he was really impressed. I'll put that tweet on screen here. He mentioned it's well thought out, architected, and very necessary for foundations and DAOs. So earlier in our last podcast, one thing that was really exciting that we brought up, it was when we were in Dubai, was kind of an integration with the Dubai police. Them kind of using the Cardano blockchain for forensics and kind of really kind of digging into that. How is that gone? Has there been anything kind of big come out of that? Have they kind of made progress towards kind of using it in other parts of the society in Dubai?
Yeah, there's been quite some progress around this, right? So we finalized all the research, the publication around that. We finalized the code base around that, right? And we actually had some discussions with global law enforcement agencies, and we saw there's an interest from global law enforcement agencies to go in this direction. But now let's say selling is hard. Let's just say it this way, right? And selling to law enforcement is even harder. And this is a bit like the telephone, right? One person with a telephone has zero value. Two has very, very little value, right? But could be quite big, but when everybody has a telephone, it becomes fantastic, right? It becomes a part of daily life. So I think what we continue to do is we continue to explore this with different law enforcement agencies, right? But we also have to say we have limited resources, right? And we don't have the best access in the world to basically log in on all local and law enforcement agencies. But the journey is continuing, and our integration partner in Dubai is also continuing that. They've been doing tremendous great work for the last 15 years. So I have faith that we'll crush it. But the fact that we've been able to do it has opened other doors for us, right?
Yeah.
So this basically proves a lot of things, right? This idea that but just because you put it on a public blockchain, you are not crossing EU GDPR and privacy. We actually use some of that in Reef. So some of the assessments from this work we actually put into Reef, because some of these privacy rules are really expensive, right? And you want to protect the employees, and you want to protect your vendors and those things. So it basically it opened up other options, and it opened up more things. So it's by nowhere gone, but if there is global law enforcement or agencies sitting out there, do knock on our door, and we happily show it. I showed it actually in Germany to a couple of law enforcement agencies when I was there at a big conference there, an industry conference for industrial products. We were the only blockchain there, by the way, which was quite amazing, and they were really flabbergasted. They were so excited about this. But digital transformation in these spaces is a marathon, huh? And I think somebody has to do it, and that's why it's good that it's a non-for-profit who does it. I mean, if it's a for-profit who would need to do it, I think the lead time is just too long. And I think this is also what's kind of unique, is that to the best of my understanding, we have two non-for-profits now, like Intersect and us, and the rest is for-profits, right? Which means that they're looking a little bit shorter term in what can actually move the needle tomorrow. And I'm looking a little bit longer term and saying, what can move the needle in the 3 to 5 year time span. And I think this is a good, divide and conquer kind of strategy.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to sales, having that kind of first use case, like saying someone as well known as the Dubai police is using this, makes it a bit easier for future sales. That's why I was really excited when I first heard that. We've mentioned kind of stable coins a lot, and when I got some community feedback, that does seem to be kind of at the forefront of the Cardano community. The lacking of stable coin liquidity, and we've kind of over the past year we've heard people introducing this idea of a sovereign wealth fund for Cardano, or even taking some treasury money and putting that treasury money towards liquidity, for stables. What do you think is kind of the best course of action for the Cardano community as a whole to increase, stable coin liquidity, over the next couple of years?
So again, I want to raise my hand and in front of you say this is my view. And I
Yeah.
think what's important is that the community needs to have a view on this, right?
Hmm.
This is my view as an economist and my view as an investment banker, trading FX and being a licensed FX trader and been doing some of this for many, many years, right? Um, and my view is goes along the lines of this. First and foremost, do not centralize. Okay, so there's been some options for the Cardano ecosystem to centralize and change the ethos to to adopt a stable coin. And I don't think we should do that. I'll give you an example. So Franklin Templeton is one of the world's largest asset managers,
Yeah.
and they basically have a Stellar integration, right, on one of their funds, which is amazing, right? So, I mean, one of the world's largest asset managers, what's not to like? But the SEC actually required them to be able to rewrite the block, the truth, in order for them to do this. I don't think we should allow that. I think one of the, we should, we can come up with a correction of the block, right? We can come up with a way to basically, you know, you know, uh, change the facts, right? But there needs to be very strong governance around that. But rewriting the block or blocking addresses, like some other people is allowed, right? That you can block an address which you have no affiliation with, just because you see it holds an asset. I think that kind of power, kills the whole blockchain ethos, right?
Hmm.
The second thing I view as, and I'm really interested in the SNEC proposal. I know that it was, non-constitutional, right?
Yeah.
But um, you know, whether we like it or not, where liquidity is, we need to be there, right? And in Cardano, I think what's been truly unique is that we did not have a lot of trading volume, and we had a very long holding period compared to other ecosystems because people truly believe in Cardano. Now, I'm not saying we should change that, right? But creating bots who trades against each other for zero fee, and the foundation or Immortal, whoever covers that fee, I don't think that's the right way to go.
Yeah.
All we need to do is we need to create utility for these stable coins. And that's why I'm so interested in micropayments through agentic AI, and I'm interested in all those kind of use cases, which is actually using the stable coins as a method to bridge into classical industries and use cases on Cardano. The more utility we bring for the stable coins, the better it is. Then there is interoperability. Um, if we could get Circle or Tether on Cardano, of course, we have a fantastic possibility for asymmetric DeFi traders in terms of they can burn DOT or burn ETH and then create on Cardano and opposite. And I think this has a value proposition which short term will be huge. But neither of these two providers is interested in doing anything with Cardano right now. And that's partly due to the strategic fit and partly due to some legacy issues. And the legacy we can't really change other than just build an amazing future, which we're already doing. And the strategic issues we can change by creating more transactions on Cardano, right? We can create more action on Cardano, more businesses, more, we can create a reason for them to come, right? This is not a money issue, or at least the money issue has become so big that it's way over our balance sheet by a
Yeah.
factor of 2, huh? I'm sorry, I cannot say so much more than that, but the numbers they suddenly presented is not, a couple of million in integration or something like that. It's very large, right?
Yeah.
Now, on our stable side, I think there's really interesting things happening, right? Here we can do a lot, and it's not sufficient that we just mint some more. We need to basically create a deeper order book. So we need to have double-sided price, down the order book. And here, that's as I open up with, I'm very interested in figuring out why we're not doing that today. And the Cardano Foundation generally has been keeping its hands off the paddle for those things, because we are also the regulatory buffer. We're the one the regulator calls, right? So we have not been supporting any market making outside integration of market makers, right? So we've been integrating market makers and ensuring to be first and second level support for market makers, and hundreds of centralized exchanges and dexes and so on, right? So we've been doing quite a lot of work there, but we've not been paying a market maker to do certain actions. And I think that's some of the things we're really looking into now, right? So we're looking into, will the community, or should we just do it? Or, how do we land this up in a way that you can actually pay some of these professional firms to ensure that there's 24/7, not just more tokens in circulation, but there's a double-sided price all the way through the order book, as deep as you can get based on the amount of assets you have. what you have to be aware of is that this is a cost, right? So this is somebody pays money and you will not get a return on that. Somebody else will get a return, and that return potentially would be more activity on these stable coins, right? And there is some alignment of incentives and things who can happen. But this is one of the places we are currently sort of looking into, and I'm very happy that I've seen other people also looking into this from the community, and we're having some good discussions around that. Whether we actually end up doing something, I don't know yet, because it also needs to fit with the vendor, right? Because it has to be somebody very professional with a very good stack, but also somebody who can report the KPIs out. I would feel it would be very wrong if somebody paid 5 to 10 million to create more depth in, let's say, 2-3 stable coins. Another part is, how do you select which stable coins you want to do this with?
Yeah.
If you are not affiliated with them, right? So I don't have a investment as the foundation with them, right? So how do we pick that? But let's get over that hurdle, right? But let's spend like 5 million on that, and then you can't see a difference. They'll be like, hold on, should we continue doing that, or did we do something wrong? Did we just lose the money, right? So what I would like to see on return is, I would like to see extremely clear KPIs. And the good thing about these market makers, they do that. The question is, will they report it out publicly? Very frequently, they will report it out to the person who pays it, but will not report it out publicly, because this might be a part of their brand reputation going forward. Which, by the way, was one of our issues also with one of the negotiations we had with the large stablecoin providers, was they said, you cannot reveal to your community what the integration cost is. And I was like, well, hold on a second. So I have to pay integration costs, but I cannot talk to my community about it, and I put all my financials on the blockchain because I want to be transparent. How does that work out? And they're like, yeah, but maybe somebody else get a better deal, or maybe you got the best deal and the other guys will then negotiate us down, right? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, well, sorry, that's not how we work in blockchain. I have all my vendors right now as a transaction on the blockchain through Reef. Now, it doesn't say the name, but when we go forward as the Cardano Foundation, we will add that into the contracts, that we can start actually making it more public. Who is our vendors and what do we pay them? And there will be some vendors who don't want to work with us because of this, because I think it's a correct business side, right? Sometimes you can sell it 10 times more expensive, right? So why don't you? But if then people go out and verify the price, it kind of hurts you as a salesperson, right? Yeah. And I think that's something we need to come over as a society. I believe transparency on the long run is the right way forward, but we also need these quick wins, right? So I do think some active market making on a very few of the stable coins. How to select them, I don't know. We need to figure that out, and somebody just need to take a bite of that carrot and get that running. And that's also why we've been supporting these DeFi proposals. And on the other side, we do have these centralized exchanges who require a lot of money for listing fees. And I think just because you're on an exchange, it doesn't mean you get traction. However, if you're not on the exchange, you definitely do not get access to those clients, right?
Yeah.
So you need a value proposition, you need utility, and when you have that, I think we as a community should be able to vote on those people and say, yeah, it's okay that you get some money, but maybe this could also be seen as a different way. It could be seen as a reverse loan or something like that, right? You loan some money from the treasury, and as you move across, you can generate a lot of transactions fee in Cardano. Those have been subtracted from the original loan or something like that. I think the beauty of blockchain is there's so many options, right? And we can test it.
Yeah, I know that with the size of that transaction, using Reeve, it really would have, kind of stood out. Even if the deal was accepted, I think even though the vendors aren't listed, it would have been, kind of like, oh, that's a larger one than usual. So one thing I'm curious about, the Midnight blockchain is launching, and you guys, have the ability to kind of, claim some of those night tokens. Do you guys see a role, with the Midnight blockchain? Are you guys going to claim those night tokens, and how do you kind of seeing that evolve, over the next few years?
So we've been doing a lot to support the Midnight launch, right? So specifically around the exchange integrations, we have some of our engineers, which has been using a lot of time to help people and help wallets to be able to claim. I also, been doing quite a lot of keynotes, and we've been, helping on some of the business development.
Yeah.
What we couldn't do, or what we wouldn't do, was we did not want to pay for the exchange listing there, right? Because it is it's an IOG project, right? But it is a Cardano native asset, and we did not have a good way to sort of say, why is this better than Aragon or Snick or whoever that might be, right? Mm-hmm. So So we didn't do that, right? Currently, we seem to not be eligible at all. So we're sort of, it seems like we're blacklisted. We will reach out to the Midnight Foundation and kind of require and ask sort of if this is a mistake or what's happening. But no, we are unfortunately not able to do that. We were planning on actually claiming the night tokens, and we were planning on also we're ready in pre-prod to spin up a set of pools in order to test the framework, and we also wanted to put it into antithesis and some of our testing frameworks to ensure that it becomes as solid as possible. And we do see a set of business cases where CK rollups and snarks and other kind of privacy layers is the right way to go. And we will continue, as Midnight gets more mature, we will send all those leads over to the Midnight Foundation so we can get, the more people on blockchain, the better, basically, right?
Yeah.
But at the moment, we are not eligible to claim.
Yeah, that's a bit surprising to me that you're not eligible to claim. And I, with all the things that you're working on with Reeve and Viridian, it does seem like there is kind of some value add, kind of working with the Midnight blockchain and adding that, to this tech stack with the, ability to do privacy and disclosures. But kind of, moving on to a different topic, this year, like I posted a picture. It was a picture of our podcast from last year. And I said, oh, I'm interviewing Frederick tomorrow. What questions does the Cardano community have? And I would say the feedback was a bit more negative, this year than our last podcast. Because I do that picture every time. I ask, what does everybody want to ask, the Cardano Foundation? And, I was honestly a bit surprised to see how kind of negative the backlash was on that tweet. And there definitely seems to be kind of a rift, between the Cardano Foundation and IOG. And, where do you think that rift started? And then, over the next couple of years, how do you think that we can kind of, mend that as a community and move forward? Because of course we live in a decentralized society, at least in the Cardano world, but, collaboration is always, beneficial, I think, for a brighter future.
So I'm a little bit unsure where, I mean, there's always been a bit back and forth with the Cardano Foundation and IOG based on the origination story of the Cardano Foundation. Yeah. I do feel that built up a fantastic relationship to Charles, and every single one of my teams are working with members of IOG on a weekly basis, right? So we do have a good coordination there. But I do think specifically, let's say from certain people, there's been there's been a rift, as you're saying, right? Where that exactly, what exactly that's all about is quite hard for me to say, but I do think we stand stronger as a community when we coordinate. We don't need to agree on everything, but when we do good coordination, and also the outside world, when they do due diligence on us, they don't like to see these things, so I think, so we should definitely get that solved. And I'm going to be at Token 2049, and I believe that that Charles is there as well, and I know Ken Kodama-san and Phil will be there. So I'm truly hoping that this will be a good opportunity for us to have a glass of matcha tea or coffee or a cold plunge or whatever is needed there, and get things rolling. It is also, I have to say, and be truly honest, right? I mean, it is true, right? That so much is happening in Cardano, and depending on where you hook in, you get different views, right? True. So there's a lot of like micro biases, depending on where you are. I took a little bit of a, I had to basically only, I post a little bit on Twitter, but I don't actually read comments and I don't answer, as you know, I answer emails and stuff. But I do notice when I'm a little bit too much on Twitter, I'm not the best I can be. I am the best I can be when I go out there and I move the needle and I solve problems and we implement. I don't want to, I like talking like face to face, and unfortunately we are in 2 different time zones, so we needed to do it virtually here, right? But I do think one of the big things we need to pay attention to is we need to bring people together in the same room. When people are sitting face to face, it's a different conversation, it's a different type of collaboration. Very often we find a way to move forward. And therefore I also think these proposals like the Cardano summits and technology summits is super important because it gives us the opportunity to bring people into the same rooms. Now, I do know it's still really hard. We chose Berlin this year, right? But we're also going to Buenos Aires. We're also going to Africa. We're going to different places, right? But there was the Rare Evo event where unfortunately I was not there, but there was a big team there. So I do think people are meeting up, but we need to keep ensuring that people meet up, and we need to keep inviting people to this, like outside Cardano. We need to show people how strong Cardano is, right? And in these then physical areas, I think what works really well is that we do have fantastic people, and it's not just Charles and me. It's there's so many really great people around Cardano, but we do not have sufficient transactions on chain, and we do not have sufficient product to market fit. And this is really where the next battle is. We now have a fantastic blockchain who can do nearly everything. So let's move on and then actually get it to do everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've definitely seen that on X. We actually launched my first product last month, and on other sites, everybody was loving it. Hundreds of positive comments. This is exactly what Cardano needs. And if you were only an X user and you got on there, you'd think that the app sucks. Everybody hated it. Nobody likes it. Whereas on all other socials, it was kind of popping off and doing well. Kind of the one final thing, I kind of wanted to bring up is, one thing that people mentioned a lot was the kind of ticket prices around the summit. And, I've kind of looked into it a bit more. I've kind of seen, Alex Manza, he mentioned that, they're trying to actually build a sustainable summit.
So no, I think I'm really looking forward to seeing you in Berlin as usual. As I said, I think these things are really truly important, right? We need to keep evaluating this and move that forward. We have a really good system in giving really large discounts for people who really uses the blockchain.
Yeah.
So I don't know if you saw that. You can connect your wallet, and based on your activity on chain, it gives you a large discount. Now, if you don't have any activity on chain, but you talk a lot, it won't give you a discount, huh? And then for the developers who might not be doing a lot, there's a password or sort of like a challenge they can do. And I saw there's already cheat sites coming up there, right? So there's good possibilities for developers to go through that route. It's something we tested with the developer conference before, right? My hope is that we can move away from this, that there's free money, to a situation where you're giving back, right?
Yeah.
We want to get to a situation that we need to put money back into the treasury, basically, right? And any way we can do that is a good way, right? And if we can get to a situation, we can get to a sustainable summit who does not need a treasury withdrawal by any means. I mean, we paid for it the last many years, right? And it was some very big tickets. And we're willing to, we are actually, by the way, we will keep paying for this also this year, right? So for instance, we have not factored in all the employees and stuff like that, and all the work on the coordination is not in there, huh? Yeah. This is just purely sort of vendors and stuff like that. I think we need to get to these situations that transaction fees goes up, not go up, but we see more transactions, which basically pays more transaction fees, which basically loads back into the treasury and pays the incentives. We see, situations that people get a grant or get something, they get rocking and they find a business model where they don't rely on this. I mean, the more we can get to a situation that incentives are being covered by activity on chain, the better it is. And I think this is the key. And then
I agree.
Yeah, and yeah, as I said, we will, if the tickets prices are still a bit too high, we'll figure out how to bring more discounts to the people who actually do transactions on chain. But I don't believe that just because you own some ADA, it should be free. It was not a part of the proposal, right?
Yeah.
And I don't think we should get to a situation that you can only have a summit if you can get a treasury withdrawal. I think that's also bad. But I know I spoke to the Rare Evo guys and I spoke to others, right? And we none of the big event providers are at a really truly break even at the moment, right? They all rely on external help. So yeah. And then we are community, right? There's group tickets as well, right? So hunger together as a group, find 5 people, and you get another discount. But I think we were a bit too weak on the initial presentation. The first sort of like €8, and you're like, whoa, right? And you didn't really sort of see all the discount opportunities. We got that corrected very fast.
Of course. Yeah. Well, I wanted to say thank you for taking the time today, Frederick. It's always a pleasure. And, each year that I have you on, it's always kind of exciting to hear the updates from the Cardano Foundation. And I hope to do it again. Maybe we can set something up in Berlin this year.
I would love to. I mean, as I said, that we can do a short version in Berlin, and we can do an even longer version, and you figure out which one you want, huh? We
Perfect.
also want to do a crowd. We do every month. We do these AMAs. So basically, it's not as good as other people do it, right? But we have an hour every month where I basically try and answer as many questions as possible. We still haven't figured out the right time to do this, meaning we don't have enough audience yet. I think
Yeah.
we could get more, but I think this is also a good place just to meet the people from the foundation, including myself, and come with some good questions. We even had an
Awesome.
AI last time asking a question. That was quite fun.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll include the links to that down below, to the AMA, also to Veridian and Reeve, and some of the CF social accounts. And yeah, thank you to everybody for watching. It's been a fun podcast, and I know you got to get to it. So thanks again, and I hope you have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, Pei, and thank you for your huge contribution to the ecosystem and for always being out there and getting things done. Really appreciate it. Have a good one.